We're going off camera.
All right, good evening, everyone, and welcome to the City of American Canyon Restoration Plan Community Meeting. We'll give folks another minute to join before we get started. All right, good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us this evening. Welcome to the City of American Canyon Restoration Plan Community Meeting. It looks like we still have attendees joining, so I'm just going to give folks another couple seconds to trickle in before we kick it off. All right. Good evening. Welcome everyone to the City of American Canyon Restoration Plan Community Meeting. To kick us off, I'm going to share some information about the Zoom features for tonight's meeting. All right, so we are in a webinar format tonight, which means that you are muted. If you're interested in asking a question later on during the Q&A portion of the evening, I'll give some more instructions then as to how we're going to do that, but we'll be unmuting folks for that. You can use the chat button at the bottom of your screen to communicate with us if you're experiencing any technical difficulties. You can use the raise the hand feature at the bottom of your screen during the Q&A to be put into a queue. And then we ask that you use the Q&A button at the bottom of your screen to ask any questions that you have of the project to the project team. And we'll either be answering those during the presentation or during the Q&A portion of the evening. You can also select live transcript if you want to see automated closed captioning for the presentation. And if you're experiencing any issues hearing us, you can try clicking the audio settings and turning up your volume. And you can also join us by phone this evening if you wish to just listen in. The phone number and webinar ID are on the screen. If you need that information, you can use the chat feature and let us know. We can send that to you as well. And as a reminder, tonight's meeting is being recorded. So with that, I will kick it off to my colleague, Michelle.
Hi, everyone. Very glad to be here with you this evening. We're going to start with a brief overview of the project by Erica Almond-Smithies, who is the Public Works Director for the City of American Canyon and who is leading this project on behalf of the city. And a short Zoom poll just so that we can get to know a little more about you in the audience and your interest in the project area. I'll provide an overview of the wetland restoration plan. I'm Michelle Orr with Environmental Science Associates, and I am a restoration engineer. I'll give an overview of the project goals and objectives, the site conditions, some of the data that we've been collecting and studies we've been doing, and then really the meat of it will be the initial restoration and public access enhancement concepts. Then we have a brief update from Janelle Selleck on the Wetlands Ecology Center. Point you towards our project survey where we hope to interest you in answering some questions about the project that will help us make some decisions going forward, knowing what people are looking for and what's important to you. And then we have at least 20 minutes set aside for Q&A to take your questions. We have additional staff from the city and from Environmental Science Associates here who have been involved in the project who are also available to help answer questions as we get to that point. So I will turn it over to Erica.
Good evening, American Canyon and interested parties. I'm Erica Almond-Smithies, Public Works Director, as Michelle already introduced. We're here tonight as the city went out to, as everyone may not know, Measure AA was a Bay Area wetland restoration, Bay Save the Bay type of proposition that went to the state voters in 2016 and was implemented in 2017. The city didn't waste any time and went after the first grant opportunity and landed a grant to work on 3 feasibility studies, which was recreational, educational, and address safety concerns for this area, this beautiful area that we already have trails for. We already have master plans for the Clark Ranch. It's already an active recreational area, but there's still more work to do. And oops, sorry, go ahead. Oops, we jumped too fast there. Why are we here? We have concerns about safety on the North Slough area. Habitat, always trying to better the habitat out in the area. Hydrology, that kind of goes hand in hand with the safety on the North Slough, the connector piece as you walk out along Eucalyptus and go out to the old salt plant in the over recreational area of Glass Beach. We have the concerns there of the failing pipeline. We had flooding and erosion after the 10 inches of rain last year along the edge, and also concerns of the 50, 60-year-old culverts that are underneath the section there. So we're studying the feasibility study of replacing that with a bridge or a culvert, a better, appropriate culvert, which Michelle will go over later in the meeting. Public access, recreational abilities to put a couple, at least one kayak launch out in this area, maybe more. Addressing sea level rise and the possibility for educational at the courtyard area to the Eco Center. This is a big venture for the city, and we're hoping with these studies completed, the 3 feasibility studies and the wetland restoration plan, which a draft will be ready later this year, at the end of this year, for public review, like in early January, February. But the idea of teeing off for the next Measure AA grants for implementation or other grant funding opportunities to actually implement these great projects for the city. And we have a poll. So I'm going to let Nicole, or is it Katie, discuss the start of the meeting. Please select an option. Please fill out your poll here. I don't know if I should better be speaking about this, but why are you here tonight? We want to know about you and your interests so we can help better relay those and maybe answer some questions at the end of this presentation. So we'll give you a few minutes here to fill this out. So quiet. We have any background music?
I'll just make one note, Erica. Barry, we received your chat that you're on but not showing on the panel. Since it is a Zoom webinar format, all the attendees will not show up on the panel, but we see you all. So thanks for your note. I just want to let you know that. Okay, we have about 78% filled out. This is great. Thanks for your participation. Give folks a couple more seconds for the remaining few. All right, everyone filled out the poll. Thank you so much. We'll post those results. Can everyone see that? Great. So it looks like for how to best describe how you interact with the wetlands, 57% of attendees live near the wetlands, 71% enjoy recreation at the wetlands, and 29% said other. So that's interesting, and we'd be interested if you would like to send a chat to the hosts and panelists and let us know what those other, how else you interact with the wetlands. That would be great. For question 2, what are you most excited to learn more about tonight? See, 79% are interested in the enhancements to wetland habitats. So we're spread out across the board here, the new kayak launch, plans to protect infrastructure, opportunities for environmental education, and also others. So for folks who said other, I'm also interested if you want to send us a chat and let us know what other topics you're interested in. And then it's great to know how you heard about the meeting. So thank you so much for taking that poll.
Okay, so now I'll tell you a bit about what we have planned with the Wetland Restoration Project. Next slide, please. So the project has developed a set, an overarching goal and a number of objectives. This is based on information from the city with input from the ESA consulting team and also from our technical advisory team. The overall goal is to restore and enhance a mix of wetland habitats and to provide nature-oriented public access, recreation, and educational opportunities along the North Slough and Lower Napa River at the City of American Canyon. And then accompanying that goal, we have some more specific objectives that are listed on the right that are also guiding our more detailed project decisions. Next slide. So here's our project schedule that we've been following. We started in the early spring of 2022. We used that time to collect field data and existing information about the study area. We've been working on the feasibility studies over the summer for 3 major areas of the site: the North Slough, the kayak launch, and the Corp Yard. I'll talk more about those. And then here we are in the fall of 2022 at our first public meeting, meeting with all of you. We are going to be producing our feasibility studies, written reports of those in the winter of this year. And then we will be wrapping those into a draft restoration plan and adding a few other elements to that plan, presenting that at our second public meeting in the spring of next year, following that with the final restoration plan. That's where we are in the process. Next slide. And so the site itself, in case not all of you are familiar, on the left-hand side is the regional view, and this shows all the areas in brown are the California Department of Fish and Wildlife's Napa-Sonoma Marshes wildlife area. So this area, part of this area is, the site is in that wildlife area. And then on the right-hand side, you can see more of the site detail. So the site's bounded by the purple line shown there. The trails, existing Bay Trail and trails are shown in the green line. The Napa River forms the western boundary of the site. And then on the eastern side is Wetlands Edge Road. This whole area, all the low-lying areas here were historically tidal wetlands, and they were diked off many years ago, but then more recently were restored. The tides were restored here in 2006. There were some wastewater treatment ponds in the middle of the diked marsh. Those got moved and the whole area got restored. And you can see North Slough coming in from the Napa River and winding its way through the site. There's also a closed landfill that's a pretty prominent feature on the site. The existing wastewater treatment plant is up north of the site. There are some treatment ponds that are labeled there that the water goes through before getting discharged to what we're calling the North Slough Pond area. All right, next slide. So data collection and studies that we've been working on, we've done a cultural resources assessment, a phase 1 environmental site assessment, which is looking for any hazardous materials on the site, biological resources assessment, and then also we've collected tide data and conducted some hydraulic modeling. For the cultural resources and the phase 1 assessment, the thumbnail version of our findings is that we have not found any cultural resources or hazardous materials that would form constraints on the types of actions that are being proposed as part of the project. And then I'll talk a little bit more about the other studies in the context of our conceptual plan when we get there. So I'll talk about each of these three areas in turn. So what we're calling the North Slough area, up in the northern part of the site where North Slough crosses under the Bay Trail. So we've got the Bay Trail there, and the North Pond is part of that area. The kayak launch, selecting a location and a type of launch is the other part of our study. And then the third part is down at the southern part of the site, the Corp Yard, the city's maintenance yard, where there's some potential for restoration and also educational facilities with the Eco Center. So starting with the North Slough area, we're proposing Bay Trail improvements. Currently, the Bay Trail is not very high in this region, and so it gets overtopped by the highest water levels. That's been causing some cracking in the surface of the trail. There's also some erosion along the levee that Erica was mentioning earlier. So the overall and the water crossing of North Slough under the trail is quite undersized at this location. So the overall idea is to raise the trail on a higher levee, construct a new and larger water crossing, and to provide erosion protection along the edge of the levee using nature-based approaches as applicable. And all of this is going to make the trail much more resilient to future conditions with sea level rise. Also up in the North Slough area, next slide, potential habitat enhancements. So this North Pond area, there's a picture of it up in the upper right. It's a lovely area. It is ponded a lot though, because the drainage back to North Slough and the bay is limited by these undersized culverts. This is not good for water quality. In sites like this, you tend to see periodic algal blooms. And in fact, here is the graphic in the lower right of the site in August 2011, where you can see that happening. And that is something that with climate change and higher temperatures is expected to happen more often. Also with sea level rise, the poor drainage will just be accentuated, and the ponding will worsen over time. Also, the undersized culvert makes it so that we're not getting exchange of water and sediments and biota between the bay and the pond. And so the pond's not able to accrete sediments and grow vegetation. Both of those help make the pond area more resilient with sea level rise. So here is where we've measured the tides around the project site. We put in gauges as shown in the right-hand side on that map in the Napa River in different locations along North Slough, including a gauge immediately south of the public trail and one immediately north. So on the left-hand side, you can see those water levels plotted as a time series. The Napa River and the North Slough south of the trail are both mapped in the blue lines, and they map right on top of each other. You have your high and low tides like you would expect and that you see throughout San Francisco Bay. But up in the North Pond area, you can tell that the tides aren't getting as high in that area. There's a big lag in getting water in and out, so the tides don't get as high, and then they don't drain down as far before the next tide starts coming in. So you see this compressed tidal series, which is called a muted tide series. And so the effect that has, as I was mentioning before, is just water quality, less resilience of the marsh, and then a narrower band of vegetation as well. Next slide. So we did some modeling of the existing conditions, and then if we restored a full hydrologic connection, through to the North Pond. And so and then we projected what types of habitat we might expect to see related to that hydrology. So on the left-hand side, you see current conditions, and the green is marsh areas and the brown is mud flat. These are projections based on the modeling, but they match pretty well with the existing site conditions. On the right-hand side is a channel. In this scenario, it's about 60 feet wide at the top. And that would require then a bridge on the Bay Trail. And you can see that you get a lot more marsh vegetation with this. The green area is projected here. The marsh extends upslope in response to the hydrology. And then over time, all the areas that are brown on the right-hand side would fill in with sediment and vegetation, and you would have fewer ponded areas over time. Now, there are different ways of getting water into the North Pond. We've modeled some larger banks of culverts. Those can be effective in restoring the tide regime, the water levels. However, using culverts gives us pretty high velocities right at the crossing. And that can be a concern if the kayak launch gets put at that location. So that's why I'm showing the larger channel scenario here. So just a summary of the enhancements at North Pond. Restoring the hydrology is the main idea. You get better exchange of nutrients, sediments, and biota with the bay, a larger vegetated marsh area. You get a significant enhancement in the ecotone transition, that transition from the marsh to the uplands, and a more sustainable marsh configuration. And then as an additional feature, we're also proposing to construct a small number of marsh mounds out in the middle of the pond area that will provide some wave sheltering and some habitat diversity. For the kayak launch, this is a map that we took off the San Francisco Bay Water Trails website. It shows the existing kayak launches out in the project area. So on the Napa River, there upstream, there's the launch at Cuttings Wharf, and then Green Island boat launch. And then further east, there's a launch on Hoodman Slough and at Cullinan Ranch. And then our 3 proposed locations that we're considering are shown as the pink stars there. Yep, and here they are closer up. So one proposed location is at Glass Beach. A second is North Slough at that Bay Trail crossing. And then the third is further south, North Slough at the Corp Yard. So the process we're going through is to select one of those locations for the launch. Next slide. Okay, so we're going to zoom into each of these and do a little remote access tour. So for Glass Beach, this is a ground level photograph of that area. It's a very scenic beach. I think it makes for a very nice user experience from that perspective. However, it is quite far from the available parking area, which is in the upper right of that aerial photograph. There are also some remnant materials and glass out in the beach and then underwater from a prior use of this area. So any launch in this location, we'd need to make sure that those materials were cleared out so that people could safely wade into the water with their kayaks. Next slide. At the Bay Trail crossing, this is the proposed put-in location. So the North Slough comes right through there, and it gives the kayakers quick access to the whole restored North Slough area. Next slide. And then the third location at the Corp Yard, this one, I forgot to mention on the prior location that has like a moderate walk from the car park out to the put-in location. At the Corp Yard, this actually has the shortest distance between the parking and the kayak launch, and also a very scenic location right on North Slough. Oh, and sorry, I forgot to mention, if you could go back for a second, one of the drawbacks of this location is that it would have the greatest environmental impacts, because there'd be a footprint associated with building a new boardwalk between where that levee ends and the location of the Pink Star. We'd need to put a boardwalk through the existing marsh there and mitigate for any impacts associated with that. Our landscape architect has been looking at different types of ADA accessible kayak launches. That would be also, that's a requirement for new Bay Trail, water trail launches. So we've been considering two basic types. At the top are different types of water entry paths. So at the top left is a water entry path where it's a concrete slab that just goes into the water and you wade in until your boat's floating and you can head out from there. On the top right is a water entry path at a beach. This is at Crane Cove in San Francisco. At the bottom is a different type of launch, a low freeboard dock. So just meaning that there's not a lot of difference in the height between the top of the dock and the water. So on the bottom left is a pretty typical low freeboard dock with a simple gangway connecting it to the land. This is at East Bay Regional Parks, Bay Point property. And then lower right shows a low freeboard dock with an additional feature, which is grab bars, which is an additional benefit for folks who need it. Next slide, please. And then this is our very preliminary evaluation table of how we are considering the different locations and evaluating them according to the criteria that we'd like to have for the kayak launch. So Glass Beach, we're looking at the applicable type of launch. So that would be a water entry path. At North Slough and at both locations, the other locations, we'd be looking at a low freeboard dock configuration. And then we've gone through and rated how well these perform, green being the best and red being the worst and yellow being somewhat in between, how they perform in terms of the user experience, waviness, like level of choppiness of the water, access from parking, that distance, connection to the Bay Trail, and in fact, all these locations score very well there. The educational tie-in, and here, of course, the location at the courtyard scores the best because that's also the location for the proposed educational center. The potential environmental impacts, safety, and cost are the remaining considerations. Later, you'll see that we are hoping you'll fill out a survey that's on the project website that will give you a chance to weigh in on which of those criteria are most important to you as a potential kayak launch user, if you fall in that category. So now the third part area of our feasibility study, the courtyard, the habitat enhancement. On this property, there's an emergency overflow pond that is currently part of the sewer collection system, and it's only used in emergencies, very rarely. In fact, the wastewater treatment plants recently made upgrades where they are not expecting to have to use this pond at all. And so what the city and the ESA team are looking into is whether that can be formally abandoned and separated from the wastewater treatment facility and become available for restoration. And it would make a very good restoration site. Oh, and we did evaluate this in our phase 1 environmental assessment, and there are no chemicals on this property that would be inconsistent with restoring this and having it be great habitat. Okay, so a little bit about what the wetland restoration could look like. There's a picture of the existing emergency overflow pond on the upper right. It has sparse rudal vegetation. very limited ecological values. And then at the lower right is a picture of a similar type of site that has been restored down at the Oraloma wastewater treatment plant down in Hayward that our staff has worked on. And here you can see a lot, extensive vegetation growth. This is upland transition, ecotone transition vegetation, but at the American Canyon site, we would also expect channels and tidal marsh habitat. It's at good elevations for that once the tides are introduced. Next slide. And doing a habitat restoration at the overflow pond would have some great tie-ins with the proposed education center. It would create accessible and visible restored habitats that could be visited. It would demonstrate innovative landscape management, and then would connect the restored wetlands via trails. People can go out there and recreate in that area. And on the lower left here is a picture of a similar education eco center out at Herons Head Park in San Francisco, which has similar tie-ins with the restored marsh in that area. And with that, I will hand it over to Janelle to tell you more about the proposed Wetlands Eco Center.
Sure, thank you. And hi, everyone. I'm Janelle Selleck. I'm Executive Director of the American Canyon Community and Parks Foundation. As Nicole, Katie, and Erica have mentioned, we really share in the city's vision and idea that the courtyard really has tremendous potential to be repurposed and used for education facilities. Actually, we had been looking around for a potential site for an education type center and are thrilled to be able to partner and kind of take this particular piece of the project out and study it in a little more detail. Kind of a snapshot of the past year has been us funding and managing the technical studies of the site. So we know that this is this building is sound. It's a great and relatively easy to repurpose. The location is good. And all in all, there's tremendous opportunity for repurposing and really helping to tell this story of conservation and restoration involving not just this particular area, but really the entire wetlands as a whole. And that means going all the way back to wetlands restoration to the salt ponds, things that we're already benefiting from. So there's just great potential here to kind of tell this whole entire story and wrap it all together. So as I mentioned, we've been funding these studies. We've looked at the architectural renderings and what those could look like. In addition, we've done quite a bit of community outreach. And so the conceptual plan, actually, I'll ask you to slide forward in 1 second, but we do have a survey out. So I'm hoping that everyone, if you haven't taken this survey yet, please find it. It's in the chat box, I believe. But we're continuing to gather community input on what sorts of programs you would like to see for you and your families, and also how you would, how you see a center like this best serving the community. So please take our survey if you hadn't yet. And with that, I'll go ahead and have you move the slide forward. I can share a little bit about, so this is the conceptual plan that we've developed. Again, this is a work in progress here, but the idea being that this particular courtyard site, which is roughly about 2 acres, could be repurposed into an educational center with a vision to be really a hub for environmental education, community programming, and this possible idea of this makerspace or environmental artist type workshop, again, to try and connect the community to the outdoors and the beauty of the natural environment. So some of the things on the conceptual plan include repurposing the east side of the corporation yard building, and you'll see it says Eco Center building in that kind of rectangle looking shape there. And the front being learning gardens, what we call the front courtyard, which would be for learning space for classrooms and children to come and take part in classes. And then behind that, making use of the beautiful westernly facing views, $1 million views, as some like to say, for community gathering space, possible community events such as Earth Day activities or Wildlife Festival. And one of the other nice things about this conceptual plan is the possible opening of additional walking paths to allow the community to come in and experience the wetlands. So we're really hoping, again, that this project will help create and provide a hub for environmental education for not just American Canyon, but for the entire county. And then also hope that it will create new and expanded environmental partnerships. As we all know, there's a lot of great organizations doing work throughout the county on projects such as these. And we'd really love to have this be a home for conversation and activity around all of that. So again, this is our conceptual plan moving forward. This plan will be going through public process, and we're continuing to work and partner with the city on what a lease agreement might look like, and also just to make sure that this is a viable project for the whole community. So I encourage you to reach out to me if you have any questions. I can drop my email in the chat box there. And with that, I think that's about it. Go ahead and move forward on the slide.
Great, thanks, Janelle. And as Janelle mentioned, there is a Wetlands Ecology Center program survey, which I posted in the chat. And I will also post a link to the City of American Canyon Wetlands Restoration Plan survey. So there are two separate surveys. You can either go to the cityofamericancanyon.org/wetlands website to access that survey, or I will put that in the chat, and we look forward to receiving your feedback. And if you could submit feedback to both of those by November 8th, that would be most helpful. So I'll put that in the chat right now. All right, so we have concluded the presentation portion of the evening, and we'll move on to the Q&A portion. Thank you all for your patience with your questions. Katie, if you could go to the next slide. So how we'll do the questions and comment today, we'll ask that if you'd like to provide a verbal comment, please raise your hand. That would automatically put you in the queue. If you've joined by phone, which I don't think anyone has, but if anyone is on the line, you can use *9 to raise your hand as well. I'll call on folks in the order that their hands were raised and put in the queue. We're going to ask folks to limit your comment or question to 3 minutes tonight. Please respect each other's input and allow space for others to contribute to the conversation. We'll also let everyone have a chance to speak first before calling on anyone for a second question. If you're experiencing any issues, technical issues, you can let us know in the chat. Otherwise, we do also have the Q&A button. We'd love for you to submit your questions in writing to that button. That way we can answer them and everyone can see. One question that has been coming through is whether the presentation will be posted on the website. And yes, the recording from tonight will be on the website, so you can revisit this later. All right. So we can go to the next slide. All right, so we have some hands raised. I will do my best with pronunciation. When I call on your name, you'll be prompted to unmute yourself, and then you can unmute and ask your question. And again, please limit it to 3 minutes. So I'll start with Justin Hamilton Hole.
Good evening. All right, this is great news. I'm so glad to hop on the Zoom with you guys. I want to see if you guys there's gonna be like a handbook tell you the handbook for the new place. I mean, we can have you guys just mailed out and say what's going on there. That maybe I can make a handbook book it or something and see put the picture in there and mail it right. I'd like to see that more. And I want to see the website, new website, put the scribe so I can put my email in there and see what's going on my email. So thank you. Good luck. I'm so happy.
Thank you, Justin.
Thank you, Justin. Okay, the next person who has their hand up in the queue is Nance Matson.
Hello, how's everybody? A quick question for you on the North Slough project. You mentioned the amount of flow we have going through the culvert right now is really low. Do you think the flow we're going to get through that expanded channel is going to be sufficient, or are we still not quite getting enough flushing of that north pond?
The idea would be to have the new connection, hydrologic connection, be big enough to get full flushing. So that's what we've been using the hydrodynamic model to assess. So we have been able to show that we can get a full tide range and good flushing with either a bank of 6 culverts or with a channel. We've modeled a range of sizes, but between say 30 and 60 feet wide, we should be able to get good flushing.
Great, thank you.
Yeah.
Great, thank you. Next in the queue is Val and Henry. So I will prompt you to unmute.
Hi, can you hear us?
Yes.
Oh, great. So we recently went kayaking in this area because I just was looking for some wetlands to kayak in, and there was some kind of community event there. And they told us to join this meeting because they saw us walking by carrying kayaks, and we carried them to Glass Beach. And I'm telling you, it was rough. It was a very, very long, difficult journey. And we ended up taking them out at the, what was it? The North Slow area, just like going over the reeds, which was probably very rude. But anyway, we were intimidated by the walk back. And so I just wanted to like advocate for it. I think that the North Slough area sort of feels like the best for us, especially if you could drive a car up to that location, which from what I remember, there is like a very clearly like car access. I've gone to other kayak launches where you can like drive up, drop the kayak, and then go back and park. Anyway, that was my 2 cents. I don't know, Henry, if you want to add anything.
I would add weighting the vehicle access might be a wise way of thinking about making them more accessible and usable.
Yeah, definitely.
That's
Thank you.
very helpful.
Yeah, we're so
Yeah.
excited about it. It was a very nice moment.
And encourage you to fill out the survey as well, because it asks a lot of questions about distance from parking.
Great, we will.
Perfect, thank you. All right. We'll now move on to Charlie. Charlie, I will give you permission to unmute.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it. Good evening, everybody. Great presentation. Question, again, I guess regarding the kayak launch. When we say kayaks, do we also mean non-motorized boats just in general? I guess is one question. And then number 2, has there been consideration on entry points for boat launching based on the size and width of other non-motorized boats?
I will try to answer that question. We also have our landscape architect on the line. So Isaac, you could hop in if you'd like to add, but so we are using the term kayak launch as a shorthand for non-motorized boats and paddle boards. That would include a whole set of similar boat types. And then I think you asked if we were considering any kind of different sizes of different types of non-motorized boats. And I'm curious what you have in mind there.
Yeah, I'm curious because I paddle a Hawaiian outrigger. I have an OC1 and it's a little bit wider than the narrow kayaks or paddle boards. And I know that there's certain slough entry points might be a bit narrow, only if you have kayakers coming from either direction being able to pass. So I was just curious about considerations, like I said, of size, of certain widths of the channels by which that are being assessed for both the launches, for all the launches.
Okay, so you cut out a tiny bit there in terms of what I was hearing, but it seems like your question is, so for slightly wider types of boats, I guess there's the issue of getting it launched, but you were also asking about the size of the channel. And the locations that we're considering would all have a wide enough channel that, you know, multiple kayaks could raft up or pass each other. We were originally, in fact, we had a fourth location where the channel was narrower, and we did eliminate it because we just felt that it might make it a little bit hard for groups to put in, since it's not reasonable to expect kayaks to be all just single file or pass in a narrow channel. So I think the width in the channel should be fine. And then in terms of the width and how that could affect the design of the launch itself, we hadn't been thinking about that yet, but it'd be great to, it's great to hear your comment. And then if you fill out the survey, that would be a great comment to receive via the survey as well.
Absolutely. In the survey, we're hoping to get a better sense of what variety of watercraft that people would be interested in launching.
Thanks, Isaac. And thanks for your question, Charlie. I just want to point to a question that came in through the Q&A button. Tammy asked, is impact on neighborhood a factor for the kayak location, traffic and parking impact to the neighborhood?
Yeah, again, I guess I will answer this, and then Isaac or Erica may wish to chime in, but we have been thinking that there would be parking provided, and we have not been seeing the kayak use as causing congestion on the surface streets leading up to the launch, and the parking would be sufficient. And so now I don't think that has been a focus of what we have been looking at. We recognize that like if there is a launch at the courtyard location, there need to be parking added there, and that would be the proposal. There is a parking area at the the Bay Trailhead at North Slough that people would use for the two northern locations.
And just to add, that's one of the things that we have to feel out later on in the process is, can we have access out by the landfill area if there's a kayak launch added out in that area, because we need ADA access probably likely closer to the future kayak launch if one's over by the North Slough. So these are things that we still have to filter out, but we do have the trailhead parking. There is parking along Wetlands Edge, and if there's one that's out at the future ecology site, there's going to be parking out there. These are all things that have to be taken into consideration, but the idea is that the existing traffic won't increase that great. But then again, we'll see when we get there.
Great, thanks for your question. And then Barry, I see that you had 2 comments in the Q&A, but I also see your hand up, so I'm going to allow you to unmute.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yes,
Okay,
we can hear you.
I've kayaked out of the North Slough area behind where the Echo Center was be. Actually, I kayaked into it from the river, and it's been a number of years, but I recall it was wide enough. What I would think would be wide enough, you could row a fiberglass scull out of there, so like you could even do a rowboat. It seemed that it was that wide to me. It's one thing. And for the parking there, Michael Throne was one of our public works director for a short while. And he suggested that because there's 2 lanes each on American Canyon Road that runs east-west and runs into the new Echo Center, that you could shut down one of those lanes and do parking along there. So I would, because there's not that much traffic that flows through there, and that would give you a lot of extra parking along each of those 2 lanes on the north and the southbound there. And then for Glass Beach, it can get rough because the predominant winds blow from the southwest, and that's why the glass is there. That everything gets kind of all the flotsam and debris end up there from the winds, and you can get some larger waves there that so that could be a little bit of a problem for launching a kayak. I'm leaning towards the Eco Center just because you're going to have all the other things that are going on there anyway. And I think it would be great. And then I did make 2 written comments. One was about the great job you guys have done on this. I'm really encouraged to hear. I wasn't expecting the environmental benefits. I was thinking, oh, maybe it's going to cause a problem, but would be really glad to get rid of that hazard and open that up, and to hear that that would actually be environmentally beneficial on top of that. I think that's terrific. That's great news for me. The other one, oh yeah, just I think it's important for the Eco Center to have at least a separate path, some way that people from the community, if they're not interested in the Eco Center or whatever, fishermen or people walking, jogging, just out for a stroll at night to watch the sunset, that they have some way of making it out to the slough. So if that's separate, if you're going to shut down at a certain hour at the Eco Center, then maybe have an after hours path where people can just walk out there to the river and enjoy that for anybody in the community, for the entire community. So I think that would be an important priority. Thank you. And thank you again for the great work. I'm really encouraged. Thank you.
Thank you, Barry. All right. I also see that Tammy, you have your hand up, so I will go ahead and allow you to unmute.
Thank you. I had an additional question. I was wondering if you could comment about the hours, if you've had some consideration already about when the kayak launch would be available. And is the access just freely available, or is it going to be behind any kind of closed off area? I was just sort of curious. And I was also wondering, is this the city feature, so then it will be maintained by the city? And how would it work for supporting it in terms of, I guess, if someone needs assistance? I mean, is that something that Fish and Game handles, or would it be our sheriff? I'm just sort of curious. I'm not really familiar with this. So maybe if you could, share some more information, that would be great. And I did want to add quickly that the Wetlands parking lot where the sports gym is and everything, Janelle's out there a lot as well, so she knows, but the parking there is pretty full. Some days it's very full. Walkers, runners, people dropping their kids off at school. So I don't know how many people come with a kayak or if they need extra parking carrying their kayak, but parking definitely is tighter at that location. Thank you.
Erica, would you like to answer the question about the ongoing operations of the launch?
Well, typically, I'm not an expert on kayak launches, but as far as city recreational facilities, they're open until dusk. I wouldn't, there's not going to be lights, there's not going to be additions like that. So the infrastructure wouldn't be supportive of people doing night launches, if that's what you're asking. I'm not sure how the security is going to be held at Eco Center. That might be something that Janelle might need to speak to. Are they going to have it gated where it closes down at certain hours? But I would foresee the recreational as be similar to any other city parks, and hopefully the design is one of those kind of designs that is one of those perpetuity signs that is low maintenance, but will require some maintenance on the city's part at some point once it's delivered. But right now we're still in the preliminary stage, so these are things you have to work out later. Thank you. Good questions. They're all good questions.
I can talk just a little bit about the kind of Barry's comment, and Tammy to address yours as well. That the concept plans right now showed on that slide earlier, kind of the idea being that the perimeter path around kind of the 2-acre courtyard site could potentially be an existing publicly available path operated and owned by the city. So that meaning, Barry, that would be, again, like Erica said, subject to probably typical park operational hours dawn to dusk. And then yes, the ecology center site and like sort of internal footprint there would be closed up in the evening, so that it's only open when the site is open for educational or community use. So there would be a separation there with some piece that's open to the public, available for walking, kayak launch access, with the ecology center site being separate and secure. If that helps at all.
And it looks like there's another piece to Tammy's question about emergency support or assistance for kayakers in the water and who would provide that.
Does ESA have any response to that on how typically, I mean, I know there's usually fish and wildlife, but it would be normal response to in anyone in a water rescue situation. But that's something we could definitely check in with our city facilities, emergency staff to see how that could be dealt with. I'm going to leave it to Michelle maybe to respond if you know how other agencies work. I know in another agency I worked for along the Petaluma River, you know, it was fire, police and fire responded, but it'd be typical for any response, but that's something we probably need to look into as part of the feasibility studies and check in with public safety.
Yeah, it's a good question, and I don't know the answer to it.
Okay, great, thanks. So it seems like there's some follow-up there to that question. I don't see any other hands raised or other questions in the Q&A, so we do have about 2 more minutes for questions. If any of the folks have a question they want to ask verbally tonight or submitting it through the Q&A button. We also encourage you to provide all this feedback to the surveys that we linked in the chat. I'll make sure to link those one more time before we conclude the meeting. So there is the American Canyon Wetlands Restoration Plan survey, and then also the Ecology Center survey. And we would love your feedback on both by November 8th. That would be great. And Tammy, I see your comment in the Q&A. Will there be any future workshops? We are planning to have another public meeting for this project in the spring, and Michelle can touch on that in more detail when we talk about next steps. So any other questions for the meeting tonight? All right, great questions. I will pass it over to Michelle to, oh, there is one more question that came in from Tara or Tara about what kind of planning is needed for sea level rise. So I think we'll take that as our last question for the evening and then let you wrap it up, Michelle.
Yes. So Tara, glad that you asked. One of the project objectives is to create resilient trails and habitats looking forward with sea level rise. And so there are a number of elements really embedded in the design that are looking towards resilient design. So that has been integrated throughout. I'm not sure how much of the presentation you caught, but one of the main elements of the habitat restoration is restoring the natural tidal hydrology to a muted tidal area that will make that area more resilient. Also raising the bay trail, and that will make that area more resilient as well. And there are a couple other items that I touched on in my presentation that address that. So it's definitely something we have front of mind, and that will come through in our feasibility studies and our restoration plan once we publish that. So if that is our last question, I just want to thank everyone for coming tonight and being interested and passionate about this, and for your questions. It's really great to hear your perspective. So we will follow up as a team and take into account the comments as we move the feasibility study forward and develop the restoration plan. I think there were also some specific comments on the website, so we will meet as a team and see what comments we can respond to in terms of improvements to the website as well. Anything else, Erica, that you'd like to add?
I just want to thank you for all the attendees. It's probably one of our better turnouts in the last year and a half that I've been here. So I really appreciate the interest and the valuable feedback, especially the public safety concerns. That's really good in traffic. It's one thing we haven't talked about. And give a shout out to shout out to our technical advisory committees, Janelle Selleck and Barry Barry, Christian are two of our technical advisory committee members. And there's other agency members that are on it and giving us value input at separate times. So I really appreciate all the input that we're getting, and please stay tuned and please stay passionate and fill out these surveys so we get a very good plan moving forward and get some of these plans implemented into projects. And thank you to the ESA team. And I didn't introduce that we do have a few more city members that are part of this project team. There's three of us that are really working together. It's Felix Hernandez III with Maintenance and Utilities Director, and Alexandria Ikeda, Parks and Recreation Director. I can't do this without their help and their input on this. And then of course we have our communications manager, Jen Kanzenbach, helps with our public outreach messaging, and engineering team, admin tech, and like works in this area as well. Just want to thank the city team and ESA for being here tonight, and forward to
Great. I think, Erica, you cut out for me a little bit there at the end, but I think we got the message and the sentiment. So thank you. So yeah, I posted our project website in the chat where you can stay tuned for more information, and then also the survey links. Thank you so much, everyone, for attending this evening. We really appreciate your participation, and have a wonderful evening.
Thank you, everyone.
thank you.